All right. Hi, and welcome to our Wednesday WebEx for our content from Session 10 of our IT Project Management class. So this week, we're talking about not just project risk management, but everything that is a part of project risk management, namely project communication, tracking, and reporting. So we're going to talk specifically about project communications and stakeholder management, but we will be spending a good amount of time on this reporting. So as we have already seen, project communications and identifying stakeholders processes are really part of, or are a large part of, project management cycle. Our identify stakeholder, plan stakeholder management, manage stakeholder engagement, and monitor stakeholder engagement. The word monitor here is new in about 6. Processes run alongside our plan communications management, manage communication, and monitor communications management process as well. And that's also the monitor here is new in PMBOK 6. PMBOK 5 it was control. So the whole idea here is that managing our stakeholders and managing our communication is really something that runs parallel, and these two activities cannot be divorced from each other. Now, let's remind ourselves who our project stakeholders are. Project stakeholders are clients. They can be client employees, internal employees, anyone who may be affected or may affect or perceive itself or herself to be affected by a decision, activity, or outcome of a project. That's the PMBOK definition of a stakeholder. That includes, of course, our teams, our functional managers who give us our team members, the finance department that gives us our monthly funding so that we can continue our project, the executives who are interested in seeing the value that our project produces, and our project sponsor, naturally, very much, other project managers who may be waiting in the wings to see our project canceled, because then they can get more funding from the funding that we would have to return. And here is you, the project manager. And when I said project managers who are interested or affected by the outcome or by the progress of our project, we have to understand that stakeholders are not just positive, they can also be negative. That is, people waiting in the wings for project funding or for team members that they would like to have on their project but can't because you have them on your project, right? So stakeholders are either actively involved, passively involved, or even aware of the project. Here is the graphic from the PMBOK 6 that shows you as the project manager, and then shows the team here and an ever-evolving distance really from the project. Stakeholders, suppliers, customers, of course, are really not of the inner goings on of the project. This is the inner circle here of the folks who are directly connected to the project itself. So the important thing, though, is that anybody who is in one of these circles here must be identified and managed. Project objectives have to be to manage the project stakeholders. So that's very, very, very important. This means that really the stakeholders of a project, we list them, I'll get to that in a moment. Stakeholders in a project are known often, but in some cases are also unknown, and they may emerge later throughout the process of the project. And this is shown here as the little cloud of the potential stakeholder community. This also shows that in our potential stakeholder community, we find stakeholders later on in our project that have to be informed or that have to be involved as well. This is why it's so important to start stakeholder management and to plan stakeholder management at the beginning of a project, but then it really has to continue throughout the entire project life cycle. So now, when we look at stakeholders, we classify them with some classic classification models. The first one that we're looking at here is the influence and impact model, or the power and interest model, so that we have 4 quadrants, low, high, and low, high, in which we can position our stakeholders, and we can say, for example, that stakeholders with high power and influence and with a high interest in our project need to be managed closely, because these are probably the stakeholders that can make or break our project. Then we have stakeholders here that may have high power, high influence. Could be the executives that are in one of the outer circles of our project influence or of our stakeholder graphic that I showed you in one of our previous slides, but that may have maybe low interest or low impact on the project, like for example the COO or something like that. But we still need to keep them satisfied, because they are not happy. That means that they are at a higher position in the organization, that they can potentially exert their political power on the future of our project. We really want to make sure that that happens only in very positive ways and not in any negative ways. So then we have here another model, which is a salience model, meaning we need to understand who's a definitive stakeholder, who's a dominant stakeholder, who's a different stakeholder. Remember what I said previously about the other project managers, your colleagues, who are really maybe waiting for the project to get canceled so that your funding would be reallocated to their project. Yeah, those can be dangerous stakeholders, right? We can have managing stakeholders who are really interested and who need a lot of communication in order to ensure that they are always informed about the most important, or even the very details of a project, all the details to which they to have access, and there are different access levels to different information in the project. Everybody naturally gets financial information about the not everybody needs detailed technical information about the project, right? So we'll talk about that in a little bit when we talk about stakeholder classifications. Now, as we look at our first step of the project, we are looking at our first step in stakeholder management and stakeholder management planning, which would be setting up a stakeholder register. How we set up a register, we typically start with name, position, contact information, the areas of influence inside the organization, what kind of opinion they have about the portfolio, the program, or the project, so that we can already determine whether they would be in our salience model that we've just seen on this side, or whether they would fall on this side here, right? Then we also need to ensure that we understand the impact on the portfolio, program, or project that we're managing, and we need our management strategy. How are we going to keep them informed, in the loop? What kind of information requirements they have, information or data do they need from our project? Are required to give them detailed technical information? Are they interested in detailed technical results and bug reports? Are they interested in detailed financial information, for example, or schedule information, right? So then if the stakeholder and get along very well, sometimes the chemistry is just not right, and you can't help that, right? Then somebody in the team needs to be assigned in order to interface with this member, with the stakeholder here, right? We also want to catalog the issues that are identified with the stakeholder, and then take good care to manage the resolution to date. And then we, of course, want to ensure that we take note. Stakeholder engagement levels can be classified as you're seeing here. Resistant, neutral, supportive, and leading, and resistant. Resistant stakeholders can be users, for example, that don't want to change, right? As we step into project communication management, then we'll really make a plan, a very detailed plan on how to communicate with the stakeholders based on their, number one, information needs, and number two, their communication needs. Because remember, not everybody has the same communication needs, whereas it would be okay and the pro for you to maybe text the project sponsor, the vice president of finance, for example, where that information requires an email, right? For example, this is the kind of information that we want to catalog. So as we see here in project communication, our communication with our stakeholders really starts with us to encode and decode later on, of course, but to encode an idea and then get the message across to our stakeholder. Our stakeholder has specific information needs, and then we'll decode our message. And here are our communication channels that can be face-to-face, can be email, can be letters, can be voicemail, that kind of thing, right? And this here, this black box of the message and then the feedback, because when our stakeholder doesn't understand something that we need him to understand, of course, they will ask, hey, what did you mean with that? And then we are going to reignite this message cycle here in order to make sure that our message is being understood correctly. And that is always the project manager's responsibility to ensure that all messages are being understood correctly. And our communication plan codifies that. Where we step into our strategies for stakeholder management. Of course, different stakeholders have different communication and information needs. This includes our customers, our project team members, our resource managers, and our executives. And here in these boxes, you can see the different kinds of communication needs or the different kinds of ways in which we would manage the communication and the kind of information that we would present to our stakeholders. So let me drive home the point that communication is absolutely vital. 90% of what project managers do is communicating, believe it or not. So this also means there are 6 crucial rules here. You don't bury information that's crucial, and especially you don't ever bury bad information. It is good to get risks on the table or problems out on the table, and at the same time show that you have thought about possible solutions. For risks, you present mitigation plans or risk response strategies. For problems, you present plans of how to fix the problem, right? Keep meetings at a minimum. Informal talks are great when you have socialized important information. Meetings are important for push information, but really meetings cost a lot of money. Very often people are in the room for an hour or longer. I've been in meetings that lasted 4 hours, and that really, where I had a 10-minute part, that is a waste of time, waste of people's time in many cases. If you can, make sure that you have teleconferences or you don't take people away from their desks and put them in a room together unless it is absolutely necessary. And for that, I mean really constructive development activity or constructive decision-making activity. That's the only time in which meetings should be held. These meetings can very easily be held over teleconferences. And remember that what you mean isn't always what people hear. In many cases, it's very important to read the verbal cues or the non-verbal cues as well in order to ensure that people understand what you want to communicate and that they really get your point. So here we have a lot of we have our view of when to manage stakeholder communication, and what you're seeing here is that our planning process starts at the beginning of the project, but then it really continues as we find new stakeholders and as we to address new communication needs, new communication technologies, that kind of thing. So this is why our planning process goes from project start to project finish, as does our execution of our project communications and monitoring and controlling process as well for communication management. So there's ways in which project communications can occur, and this is what we're seeing here in an analysis for project communications. This could be a part of a project communications plan. For example, we have here different stakeholders, and we have different documents or different kinds of information that gets out to the stakeholders. And as we're seeing here, the monthly status report, for example, does not go to the training subcontractor, right? And plan does not go out to the business staff because really there is no need for that. The software implementation plan goes to the software subcontractor, but that detailed information is really not needed at the customer business staff level, right? Then specify the document format here. It's very important we understand, do people need a meeting? Do they not need a meeting? Internal management possibly may need a meeting or a telephone conference, right? And then we need to understand also in what format this document needs to be delivered, whether it can just be as, for example, the status report to the technical staff here, can be email ever. For internal management, the same status report will probably have to be printed out at a meeting. Then we have our contact people, very important because we always need to make sure that the correct people get the correct information, especially if there is some information that is restricted to a certain type of people, like, for example, project financial information. Understand when our due dates are. We have specific due dates for specific subcontractors, for example. We could potentially have specific due dates for executive level reporting, like month, end of the month, beginning of the month, or middle of the month. And then for other status reports, we want to make sure that these are being sent as they're being required. Now, for our, there are categories that these communications here fall into. And we're going to look at that. There's interactive communications, which is what you'll have in meetings and in teleconferences, where you have people automatically on both ends of the spectrum. Then you have push communication, which information is sent by email to recipients without their request, and those are the reports that get emailed monthly. And then you have pull communication, where executives, for example, would go on a company dashboard, and on that dashboard, they would then pull their own reports. So for communication tools, then we already talked about dashboards and collaboration tools, Google Docs, that kind of thing, and you're seeing some here in this lower slide. Of course, these collaboration tools are very important because they are taking the place of meetings more often than not, especially at the executive level. So in many cases, your job as a project manager will be to enter your weekly or monthly metrics in a SharePoint or in a Google Docs form or in any kind of other collaboration tool, and then your metrics will be aided with other project metrics and will then be distributed to whoever the appropriate channels are. Now, this here is far more automated than email, for example. Formal email communication can still occur, formal informational communication. Now, you need to use email really as a push mechanism. Email should not be used as a two-way communication mechanism, especially with a large CC list, because it can be terribly annoying to get information or to get an email saying just agree, or to get an email saying about team members that you're really not supposed to be seeing, or just information that's not relevant to you. The of meetings, I already said, really avoid meetings wherever you can. If meetings are recorded, make sure to keep them short, 30 minutes, an hour at the most, not 4 hours. Trust me, those 4-hour meetings can get very boring. And make sure that you use the time efficiently. Make sure you have your handouts and your visual media in place, as, for example, do now with this presentation. And preferably, don't take people away from their office. Make sure video conferences are short. And if you have to have meetings with a standing or an open line because you have a distributed team or part of it in the United States, and you have a scrum going on with, say, your team in India, then you're going to need to have a standing line. You need to have a conference room reserved for a full day or for 2 days or for a week even, and you will have standing communication lines open to be video conferencing lines so that you can share screens internationally, that kind of thing. That is, of course, possible, but that is a special case. So our communication needs should be assembled in the communication plan. We should look at the communication plan or communication management plan, as it is sometimes called. And these are some of the criteria for a good communication management plan. Here's an example. This is in fact what we'll be looking at next week. Communication plan starts with the header for your project. Then we list here the stakeholder name or the role, the project responsibility, and then the information need and the metrics. Remember, information need is crucial because within the stakeholder community, there are different levels of information needs. So we really want to understand what information goes to whom so that we can keep confidential information confidential in the right places. Then here we have the communication type. Communication type would be one of these here, right? Communication frequency. Times stakeholders need to be updated daily on the progress of our project. Then if there are key messages that need to be sent, like a key upbeat message that progress is great, or here are the project issues, here are the project risks, then that would go into this column. Who communicates before? Times a stakeholder may not have good chemistry with the project manager, which is why it's important to find someone on your team who has good chemistry with that stakeholder and who would then be able to disseminate the information. And lastly, and this is probably the most important column here, is sensitive or classified information okay to send. As we already discussed, subcontractors are not allowed to know each other's rates. So this is where that information would go and here, of course. Reporting performance then is really what we're getting at this week. Project status report or the information that you will enter into a corporate board. Very important. Here are some samples of a project status report, and as you're seeing here already in this example, what we have is stoplight colors. Now, project status reports, performance reports often have to be very short and very visual because the addressees of these reports, the recipients of these reports, often have 20 or 30 of these reports to wade through during a week. This means that we need to ensure that the visuals are really easy to read. This is why stoplight colors are always really great. Green always means everything is okay and running well on our project. It means we have some risks or we have some problems that we need to talk about that we need help with. And red, of course, means that we're behind schedule, we are over budget, and it's not going to be fixed within a week or two or within even a month. So this is our staff report template for the course. This here is in fact what you will be doing at the end of the week. So think about if you have a project that is in several phases, you would use these several phases. Your projects typically don't run in several phases, they run in one phase. So you will be using just the upper row here. Make sure to include the subjective health, which would be red, yellow, or green. The SPI, we'll talk about those in a moment. The cost variance, of course, as well as the budget at completion, the estimate to completion, the estimate at completion. Those are really important metrics that will allow, for example, a finance manager to adjust the funding profile for an entire unit, for an entire department, and for an entire funding period. So those are really important. And then enter your milestone dates here, of course, right? And here at the bottom, we always list in a few words the accomplishments for last week. What are we doing this week? What are we going to do next week? Are we experiencing any issues with which we need executive help that goes into the escalated issues? Are our project risks? If we have any project risks, how are we going to attack them? How bad are they? So you want to list probably your impact and your probability there. And then here, project budget, of course. You want to make sure that the executive always gets reminded of your project budget. So there are some reports. Sometimes formal project reviews will be conducted. Those will be project reviews or project audits. Progress reporting will typically only include these first three items here. And then we have forecast reporting. Forecast reporting will focus on predicting the future steps, and it will be looking at all of these lines that we've discussed, talked about, or environment management, right? in other words, really, your status report should include metrics. That's really what the recipients will be interested in. Make short sentences, not even complete sentences, and the more quick, the better. So here, for example, is a graphic from one of my old status reports that I used to deliver every week, right? For when I was working in the PMO here, project gates completed on time. Or here we have our risk matrix, of course, which you already know. Here we have our earned value curve, right? Here we have major change requests or change request categories where we have a histogram that we're seeing here, or even a Pareto chart in some ways in the first portion. So it's very important. Metrics must be quantifiable, must be objective, so you can count them, and they arrive at the same metric. They must be also, of course, proven, and they must be relevant. So they must have high impact, otherwise you're wasting somebody's time. And wasting people's time is not a good idea, right? So where are all of these from? Well, you can get them out of Microsoft Project. Here is a screen from Microsoft Project 2010. I will show you this live as well. I have Microsoft Project 2010 open here right now. I go to the Project tab in the ribbon, and I go to Reports. And when I click on Reports, this screen here opens, and you can see here report current project metrics such as unstarted tasks and those kinds of things, slipping tasks, tasks that are likely to be late, project costs here. You can see the cash flow of a project, how much money comes in or how much earned value comes in, how much money goes out, what the project is here, and I'm going to do a budget report here, which of course will, here's a project budget report for, in fact, our simple schedule. This is our HTTPS customization schedule. Here is the quick budget, right? So, right, and depending on the version of Microsoft Project that you have, in 2013 and 2016, you have a report tab, and these reports that have, including a dashboards that you can build, graphic dashboards. Remember, I talked about the importance of graphics, right? Those are right there as well. So in progress, you have reports in a different place. You go View tab, then you select a report, and then from the report, you can find all sorts of different reports. I'll show you that as well. There you go, Project Libre. Here is a project that I have open with reallocations, right? So then to View, and I go Report. As we open reports, here you see, I can see project details here. Here are the information from the site that you saw as well, and down here I have all the filters that I can engage. Well, let's see if Jennifer Shu has done any work here. As you can see, here is the work curve when she starts her work, right? And I can also build this as a histogram, right? So the kinds of reports that you would want to include. So, okay, now a specific or a special type of report is the Burndown Chart. But we already talked about when we talked about agile project management, because you're measuring your velocity and your sprint progress with a Burndown Chart. And that's what we're seeing here right now. And Burndown reports are also very popular for waterfall projects because they will show you the number of tasks to be completed, or the percentage of work to be completed, or currently completed, or the percentage of funding used, or both, or all these curves in one, right? So as we talk about our status report mix, then seen our metrics before here, planned value versus our earned value, and our budget at completion, right? That BAC that we've seen before. Then our earned value curve here that can be a very, very important project status item here, as can, of course, our cost performance index and our schedule performance index. If you don't remember how those are being computed, here's a formula. There's also a more extensive explanation in one of the previous videos. So then our estimate to complete, of course, we want to ensure that we have that. Our estimate to complete, our budget at completion minus the current the current cost right here. And there's different ways to, and here's different ways of calculating our budget at completion. Put the CPI in the calculation, then you'll have a better idea of how much you have left, because that way your CPI will adjust, will of course adjust the budget. And here for the estimate at completion, you can either say, well, here's my actual cost, and then I'm going to go around the room of my teammates, and I'm going to ask them how much is it going to cost to complete this project, so actual cost plus ETC. That is one of the most reliable ways of figuring out what the current project is going to be, or the project budget is going to be. We do that throughout an entire company that I work for. If you have to do this on a monthly basis, because this is expensive, right? Then dividing the budget at completion by the CPI will give you an estimate at completion that, if you work at the same rate at which you have currently, because CPI is the current measurement of project status, then that will give you your estimate at completion as a mathematical way of determining that. And then you can also, and I think this is my favorite, really look at the actual cost, then add to that the budget of the budget at completion, and subtract to that the earned value. And if your CPI is out of whack, because let's say one of your suppliers just went bankrupt, then this would be a good way of estimate at completion. Which of these formulas applies is what your PMO in the organization will tell you, because these obviously lead to different values, as you can see here in the example, right? This formula ESC2, this formula ESC3 is this formula here, right? Which formula is you told? So now, if we think about status reporting, then think about any changes that have occurred in your project. And guess what? There is a big change that is occurring in your project this week, which is namely that HIT Pros is merging with Cardiographics International, and Cardiographics International is a large company, so they're going to fire the entire development staff of HIT Pros, and then they're going to assign their software development staff to your team, which you will have completely new software developers who don't know your project and who don't know the code that has been written so far, or who don't know the tasks that have been performed so far, or what needs to be done on the project. And then, of course, also your project will experience a 20% resource cut, which means you had 5 developers before. Guess what? You will have only 4, right? You're losing 20% of the people, but you get to show 10% of this as savings in your budget, and the other 10% you have to put into contingency to pay for risks. And since this change here introduces major risks into project completion, of course, the 10% will be very important to have in your project budget. So, for this week, your vocabulary that I really would like to be familiar with is the communication plan, stakeholder, expectations, which comes in fact from our book, the communication cycle, sender, message, receiver, decoding, and then any of the terms that we have used for our reporting. That includes our EVM, earned value management terminology of earned value, actual cost, planned value, budget at completion, performance, schedule performance, estimate to complete. I want you to familiarize yourself, please, with these formulas. I would like you to familiarize yourselves with these formulas for estimate at completion. Yeah, so that's it for today. Do we have any questions? Let me pull up our participants here. Are there questions? Well, to see if anybody is saying anything. All right, so your job is at the end of this week to produce a report that calculates the CPI and the SPI for your project that use as shown here in order to deliver this report that we have seen this. Okay, this is the report template that you will be filling out. If there are further questions, then I thank you very much for your participation, for your attendance, and look forward to seeing you again in class or to seeing you online. So much. Have a good day. Bye-bye.